informal because we need to identify a way of working together, and we have to be in a situation to be free of speech in a way. So don't hesitate when you hear things which for which you don't agree, or on the contrary, for which you feel enthusiastic, to raise your hand, to interact during the panels, to propose ideas. We are trying to build up something that will be sustainable in the future. There is a high confusion about standardization. We know that very well in different sectors: policy making, science, practitioners, industry SMEs have different understanding about standardization. We hear very often a confusion between harmonization, standardization, certification. I hear that a lot in research projects. We have many different projects which have standardization components, for which there is no coordination really. We are very often not informed about what they are doing. There are free election initiatives of projects suddenly think that they can standardize something, so they will work on standardization, while very often it's not standardization. They are not in connection with official standardization bodies and so on. So we are, in a way, in this framework regarding DG Home and research programming. Policy-wise, we need to coordinate better the needs expressed by policies, but again, there is no real coordination regarding the technical knowledge that policy makers need to identify standardization needs. So we don't have this kind of interactions organized yet. So we need also to ensure that while we are calling for new standardization, from the Commission perspective, we have to hear policymakers, but we have also to hear practitioners and industry. Until at this stage, we know that standardization is being run by standardization bodies, Thematic, but also at international level, ISO, and we are obviously at Commission level not in charge of standardization, but we know perfectly that there are some needs related to policies, and we're in a position where we can program research which is in support to standardization, pre or normative research. So we need to ensure that what we will be putting on the table regarding research program, new research topics, funding, is matching the needs of what is of our prime interest, which is support to EU policies, because we cannot cover all the field. So today, it's a little bit why we invited you we called this meeting, to just frame a little bit the discussions and make you understand where we are going regarding the response to standardization, policy-related needs in the policy areas, while involving practitioners. What we have discovered, and I've been participating, for example, in practitioners' networks, I had some discussion with firefighters, for example, telling me about the need of standardization. But on the one hand, they say we don't want standardization. We don't want to have standards for example, operations, because we don't need that. But we need standard operating procedure. So, okay, so what do you need? Do you need standards, or do you need, what do you mean by standard operating procedures? They were very, very confused about the terminology. And in fact, they need good practices, best practices in a way. They need to have harmonized best practices based on their experience in the field. But they need standards when it deals with interoperability, when they have to coordinate, for example, actions in a country which is not their country. For example, in a crisis management, where we have different type of technologies, which needs to be interoperable. Here we need standardization. But there is a high level of confusion, and you will see that the way we are formulating the research programming for 2019-20 takes this into account, because we speak not only about standardization, we speak about also harmonized, I would say, SOPs, which is not standardization. And we need to have a kind of didactic explanation of what we mean when we speak about standardization. So all these identification needs, the need to understand what we have to put on the table regarding research programming, to respond to practitioners' needs, to respond to policymakers, requires involvement, requires coordination. And today it's what we will be discussing, because we need to anticipate what will be coming for the next 2 years, but also in Horizon Europe. You know that we are preparing the next framework program, which is called Horizon Europe. And in 2019, we will be drafting the work programs. And we need to ensure that your community is expressing clearly what are the needs that we should tackle. So it's why also it's important that you express your voice and you tell us, well, please, do not forget this type of sector, do not forget this type of needs. I have understood that I'm reading a book which is called Sapiens, you know, A Brief History of Humanity. And naively I thought that in my school memory, that Homo sapiens became very powerful because he has learned to build tools, you know, because in comparison to other monkeys, we learned to build tools. But actually this book highlights that Homo sapiens became very powerful because they did a kind of knowledge revolution, a collective revolution. And it's only because they have learned that knowledge has to be shared, that you can build a community not of 20 individuals, but of 50, 100, and then build cities with rules which are based on knowledge sharing and, I would say, different type of working together. It's not always good, because there are things which I've learned as well, you know, I say, oh gosh, because I think that they have eradicated a certain number of species on Earth when they started to be powerful, and they eradicated actually the other Homo species, you know, like probably Neanderthal and others. So it's not the, I would say, the only good face of the medal, but the important thing is to understand that by working together, cooperating, collaborating, then we are really making progress. So it's what we will be discussing today, and I will leave the experts discussing this, knowing that we cannot ourselves at DG Home and at the Commission do the job that you are all doing at expert level. So we need to have a mechanism by which we rely on a coordination structure, and we have a coordination support action which is now that will start in early 2019. Well, certainly Patricia will speak about this. We send to which we will rely regarding the gathering of information related to standardization. I would also like to stress that the community of users is evolving. We know that we also need to have a stronger governance structure for the community of users that will come next year. So you will see that in the program, you will be informed about this. We have defined a certain number of thematic groups, one of which will be dealing with standardization. We have to define for thematic groups. We have to get leaders, you know. I don't like chiefs, actually. I'm a little bit myself a free electron, but I know that we need facilitator, we need leaders. A leader is not necessarily a strong chief, but is someone, he or she is someone who is bringing people together, which could not be achieved in the electron way. So we will do that next year. And in the field of standardization, we will ensure that at the end of next year, the Security Research Conference, there will be a report given to high-level people. It's something that will require a lot of, I would say, community spirit, because I realized, for example, last week, I've been in a conference on Cyberani, which, please, we are... thank you. I realize that big conferences where you are all going, where there are 150, 200 people, very nice, you have a lot of knowledge being shared and so on. 3 months after, it's being forgotten because people are very busy, and then you lose completely trace of and I remember that I had myself organized conference in the water field some years ago. And since I was a policymaker, I say, if you don't have a report, recommendation expressed by events, coming from meetings, conferences, sent to the right networks, then everything that you are doing is nice, but it's lost, it's wind. I'm a little bit provocating with this, but there are a lot of reasons for which I do not accept very often invitation to conferences, because I know that I will not build, strategically it will not be a good use of my time. But if events are bringing to me at the end of the event a 10-page report saying, okay, we had all these themes being discussed, and these are very strong recommendations to be expressed to policymakers, to practitioners, to industry, then I can use that, and internally I will say to my colleagues, this is a reflection of a community of experts that I've met, and 200 people express these needs. Take that into account. And I can assure you that when it happens, it is appearing in communications. It is a document which is referred to as being an expression of a conference. And then there is a very strong impact. So please realize that if we want to build a very strong knowledge-based community, we have to stop working in a free electron way. Organize our own events, be it meetings, conferences. Everybody wants to organize something, which is okay. But if you stop here, it's wind. It will be vanishing. As soon as you do something, we write something. We deliver recommendations, and the community of users has this ambition to drain actually the knowledge, and in standardization, it will be exactly the same situation. And if we do that, then we will build a real community. If we don't, we will still be working in a friendly way, and we will not build a community, a knowledge community. So it's a little bit my call regarding what will happen next year. It's not an exercise where we meet in nice places, which is for me a good ice-breaking, because it's better to meet here than in a very neutral building or hotel. So it's a little bit just choice we did as well, but also to ensure that we are freely exchanging information. Not only positive information, because if you have something for which you are very upset, it's the place here to tell. You know, we are in a way with courtesy. In fact, you know, we will not shout to each other. But I'm also very keen to listen to things which are not working. It's things which are not functioning well is as important as things which are producing very good results. So feel free to express your wish, your sentiment, and we are here to have a dialogue. And with this, I would like to invite Patricia, who will be sharing the first panel, and I will be sitting around and maybe sometimes testing things, but I will be here to listen to you because you are the experts. Thank you, Patricia.
Is it working? Yes. So, thank you very much, Philippe, for this introduction. I couldn't have done better. You're bringing the right framework and giving the right questions. So we'll be trying to answer these questions on this panel and also on panel 3 this afternoon. Okay, so thank you very much for attending this meeting. I hope I will tell you things that you don't know, because what I've noticed is that lots of people speak about standardization, what we should be doing. How is it that we don't have standards on this and this and that? And I realize that they don't know much about what standards are and what we can achieve. So this is my presentation. I will try to give you the state of play for standardization regarding security and crisis management. So let me introduce myself first. I work for French Home Office, but I'm also chair of CEN-TC 391, which is Social and Citizen Security, European standardization body. And I'm a police commissioner. I used to work in the intelligence field for French government, also for NATO. And I also was for several years member of the Government Crisis Center, which allowed me to ensure preparedness and also manage actual crisis. And currently I'm working, I'm head of the standardization department of the French Ministry of Interior. So now, how do you get to slide 2? There. Let me give you the background. So you probably know about the background, but let me say a few words on this. So what do we have here? I'm speaking about the European situation, but it's also global. This first bullet, we're facing a situation where we really should consider how we're going to ensure security and resilience, because globalization and climate change make the situation much more complicated. So there are security threats that are growing in scale and sophistication. Everybody knows this. But in the same time, and this is probably the main reason why we should be working on standards, is that we have a very strong demand from European citizens and people living in Europe to increase their level of security according to these new stakes. People don't accept anymore their life to be ruined by disasters or crisis. So we really have to address this issue. It's a very important political and social issue. Of course, you know that we have an open environment in Europe, but crises don't know anything about our plans and our boundaries. So we should be working at being able to succeed, even though we're fragmented and multi-stakeholders response. And of course, specifically for the European Union, as you know, most of the security issues are to be addressed by the member states. So why not? But we have to make it work. So how can we make it work? And it seems that we probably didn't do every effort we could have done. Of course, the EU is, doing their best. There are so many initiatives. There are many, many agencies, the Commission, the projects, trying to bring solutions, prepare the field, put people together, invest in research. Yes, but what are we there, and how do we deal with situation concretely? We have 28 governments, people in charge of security and safety. They're not the same. They don't have the same responsibilities. They don't have the same language. So it really is a challenge. So how can standardization improve security and crisis management capabilities? of the European Union and member states, because it's the Union as a whole, of course, because we have to have an overall view, but it's also by working all together, increasing even member states at national levels or local levels security by working all together. So, first of all, I would like to make sure that everybody knows what standards are, because when I speak to people here in the community of users, most of the people think they know, but it's not always quite what it is actually. So I look at what we have in the ISO directives, for instance. So there are documents providing specifications, guidelines, or characteristics that can be used consistently to ensure that materials, products, processes, and services are fit for their purpose. So this is quite an achievement. If you're able to end up with shared documents providing this kind of outcome, it is quite an achievement, and you can build a lot of things on that and enhance resilience. Standards are concrete and shared outcomes. This is very important. The value of it is what you build. It's the consensus. And they are workable for all stakeholders. They're developed by consensus. See, there are lots of critics about standards. Hey, it takes a long time. We don't have that time. Let issue a standard, and then we'll disseminate and do a little communication so people will use it. No, it never works this way. Standards, they find their way because they are made by the people who will be using them, because it's about their business. They're not going to change their whole business, their whole organizations, sometimes change their legislation or throw away some of their investments because someone else decided they would issue a standard. They'll be very reluctant to do this. If you want a standard to work and standardization to be developed, you have to have the right stakeholders. And then everybody will find the workable solution, and it really will be a win-win situation between the users, the industries, the research, anybody involved. So standards take a long time. You need funding, you need experts, you need to pay in order to register to technical committees. You need to pay for the expenses of your experts. Sometimes you have to send 5, 6, 10, 20 experts in China, in Bali, in Canada for a week of work in a hotel. That's quite an investment. But it is valuable. It is a very, very good investment, because at the end, you have something that you can build on, something that will open a market. So, what can standards achieve? You can do lots of things with standards. They're not just pieces of paper. They produce results. So, first of them is common language. This is something that's so important, and anytime I come here in Brussels, not only in the community of users, but elsewhere, it's like going in a foreign country and people speaking a foreign language. We don't use the same language. For instance, what you call security, we call it safety. You see, so there are lots of things that, language is binding, and standardization people, we have to be very rigorous. We have to know what are we talking about. We have to make sure of this. This is one of the main achievements. Language, terminology is the backbone of what we achieve. If you don't have a common language, you will do things many times. You'll be turning around problems instead of solving them. You'll be reproducing mistakes. See, language is not a detail, it's a backbone of what we do. So we can also harmonize processes and practices. We also develop and take up useful and used research and innovation. This we do, for instance, with what the European Union, DG Home, GRC, and research programs. We ensure technical compatibility of material or interoperability of systems or data. This is crucial. There's a lot to invest there. This is essential to security and resilience. And there's a lot to gain. We develop shared methods of characterizations of products and services, so we can be sure of what we buy, and of course, in the same line, conformity assessment means, because there's, in some cases, to ensure that standards are improved, you need certification. You need not all the time, but sometimes. Certified standard is part of what we build. We also issue shared solutions to societal, commercial, or technical issues, whatever they are. And what we do is we build trust. We build trust between the stakeholders. That's important because, you see, here, or in European projects, or I see lots of different stakeholders working on this particular issue or this particular research project. What we do in standardization business is not only issuing documents, it's putting our brains all together. It's about making everybody aware of what the state of the art is. Everybody aware of everybody else's mistakes so we don't do them again. This is of high value. Clever things that we learn, where we should invest or not, should we use this tool or not. So at the end, we're much stronger to say, okay, this is what we want, because this is what we validate, and this is what we're doing, or this is what we're going to do. So the virtue of standardization is not only on what the documents, the standards we produce, it's also in the process itself. You see, you were saying that at the end, there's only wind. So one way of not having only wind at the end is say, okay, let's look at this all together, and maybe we'll end up with no standard, or just little standard on this part that need to be standardized, or we'll say, no, we don't need it, or no, this simply is not going to be a standard because it's only about agility. You cannot standardize agility. Okay, but at least you would have had the good partners all together, and everybody's mind settled on this particular issue. So this is absolutely precious. So it's a good investment. So we build trust. We build trust between users, first responders, policymakers, providers, suppliers, the institutions, research projects, and citizens. So the picture of standardization will be shown to you on the next presentation by Luc, but I wanted to point out what we have here as bodies who are actually standardizers of security and crisis management. I understand here most people don't know them at all. I've heard some people say, oh, there's an interesting initiative on emerging risk. Well, you know, this is just a little part of very, very big work of important TC, and it's not even started. So it's a detail of the whole thing that's already there and that you should be knowing about. So, of course, there are several levels. The global, the regional, let's say, continental level, and the national level. So standardization works, you know, it's partnerships. It's, of course, not in the European Union. It's network at national level related to network at regional level and related to a network at international level. There's no hierarchy. You can go directly from national to ISO, depending on what the subject is. So it's pretty much based on the national standardization bodies. They are point of contacts. So if you want to get involved in standardization issues, you would have to join your national standardization body, or maybe you can also join the one from another country. If you live in another country, that's really not an issue. These bodies here, so I've mentioned some of them, but of course there are some from one in every country. For instance, my TC, there are 29 countries and 15 partners. They have national mirror committees dealing with standardization issues on resilience and security. And then the European TC, so this is the TC I'm sharing. But there are, I'm afraid to say, 14 other European TCs. Luc will have a few words about this later on, but that's too much, so we have to work on that. And then you have a few important, very important TCs at the ISO and IEC level, international level. And most important, relevant to what we're talking about today, is ISO TC 292, which has been established in 2015, and it's security and resilience. So I'm working at the national level within AFNOR, but with all other national standardization bodies at the European level, and also at the international level as an expert. And then you have several different things that you can do in standardization activities. Of course, you can manage. You can share committees. You can convene working groups. We have also project teams on particular projects. We have joint working groups. For some topics, we have to go to match two different TCs in order to have the whole picture. But most of the time, when you work within standards, you are an expert. You work as an expert. So this is what's so interesting. It's the expert works. It really makes you grow up, you know. As an intelligence officer, I've learned a lot by working as an expert in international standardization, a lot of interesting people, lots of interesting issues. So I would like to give you a picture. I made just a little selection. There are many, many others of already existing standards. Lots of them are very, very used and already structuring the market in the field of security and resilience and crisis management. So here are some of the international standards. So I will start with the ISO 31,000 risk management. Well, this is a very, very big technical committee, TC 262. And this ISO 31,000 risk management is really one of the backbone of what private companies or even public sector does in order to enhance their resilience. So you really should know about this. It's structuring the market. What was mentioned yesterday, emerging risk, is a joint working group established with this TC 262 and TC 292. And it's not even starting. So you really should look at the work of this, because there's a security management system which is really a base of what we do in standardization. So there's another very important one, which is ISO IEC 27001, Information Security Management System. This is the constitution of information technology security. So you should be aware about it. When we when we use standards to enhance resilience, we use bricks, you know, and this is the number one of IT activities and IT protection. The ISO IEC Joint Technical Committee 1 is enormous. It's big like a government. It has 35 subcommittees and hundreds of working groups. You see, so you really should be aware about it. And they do something that, you know, is applied by all private companies and anybody using standards or selling information technologies solutions. So you really should be aware of this. And if we issue European standards dealing with information technology, we will build on what they do, because this is basic. We also have ISO 14001, environmental management, which is also very relevant to issues linked to climate change. And we have also quality management. Everybody knows about the ISO 9001. This is basic. You need to make sure of the quality of what you have in order to implement your security and resilience processes. It's basic. And so now I'm going to talk about few of them, of the standard issued or projects on the way in ISO TC 292. So that's, first of all, security and resilience vocabulary. So this is the Bible. See, so when we do standards, when we develop our work, we use this. It's just been published. It's again under revision. It's almost always under revision because there are always new things going on. So if you don't agree with the way we describe the notions and write down what the vocabulary is, you can always join and have your say. And so this is ISO TC 292, Working Group 1, terminology. It's a backbone, really. And we also have, this is 22,301. This is crucial for lots of big companies. Big companies use a lot this very important security management system, business continuity management system, and its requirements. When you say requirements, it means that, well, you have to apply them, and most companies using this standard are certified. It's important because this is how standards get into the real world. It's because some companies cannot contract or cannot have insurance if they don't apply some standards, and this would be a good example, and if they're not certified. So you really have to have a dedicated staff and get your whole organization organized on what is required by this standard. So this is not a small issue. This is a very important issue, and it's already structuring many, many private activities and public activities also. We also have published last year, this is a very important one, I worked on this one too, emergency management guidelines for incident management. So this is emergencies, not incident, not crisis, not disasters, but emergencies. And it's a very, very important standard. You see, it's only guidelines, it's not requirements, because it's a first version. So we don't say shall, we don't say should, we say could, we say, you know, it's, but it's still, it's a very, very, very useful for all public and private sector. We also just published a few months ago a standard proposed by Russia and it deals with some part of critical infrastructure protection based on their experience of pipelines and gas infrastructures. And it's called Guidelines for Monitoring Facilities with Identified Hazards. I don't know yet if this one is going to be very used, but it's an important one, I think. We also have this one is old and it's pretty much used. It's mass evacuation guidelines for planning. We're going to need mass evacuation. We always do this, when we have a disaster or a big incident. We also have guidelines for public warning. We just published guidelines for supporting vulnerable people in an emergency. At least 20% of populations are vulnerable people. When you look at elderly people, the world is aging, especially in Europe. We have many, many old people. We have children. We have sick people. We have disabled people. So this is quite an issue. Sometimes when you evacuate old people, you would kill them. So there are lots of things you should be aware of before taking any decisions. So this is addressing this kind of issue. We have guidelines for exercises. This one is under revision now. It can be improved, and we probably should be using this and build something much more detailed or sectorial on this particular issue or this one at the European level. Because you know what, we're doing exercises, and we don't have standards for exercises. We don't have standards for lesson learned. We would need standards on many, many topics. And we're currently working on, this is an interesting one, guidelines for use of social media in emergencies. It's a very difficult topic and very interesting though. So this is the international level. Let's switch to some of the European standards. Of course, we adopt some of the IEC standards as EN, not always, depending on the interest, but we issue standards at the European level that are complementary. Of course, we are all in ISO. There are, I don't know, something like 35 European countries doing ISO standards within SOTC 292. So this means that we do what we want. We are conveners of, we have 6 working groups and 5 are shared by Europeans because it's one country, one vote. So we do what we can. So when it's relevant at the global level, we do it at ISO. But at the European level, we might need something specific, something more detailed, something built on what's done at the international level, something to improve our processes and interoperability on specific issues because we're neighbors and we're facing the same risks and threats. You see, so this is what we're trying to develop at the European level. So we're working now on the work that's not done by ISO 223,000 of terminology, which is CBRN glossary. This is crucial. When you're in an incident, if you don't have the same language, it's terrible. And if it's related to CBRN issues, minutes means human lives. So you really should know what you're talking about. So we will probably be able to publish this before the end of next year. So we have a new working item program, CBRN training framework, requirements for CBRN education and training. We would need experts on this, so if you're interested, you would come to me and then I will explain you how we can do that. We also published CBRN vulnerability assessment and protection of people at risk, technical specification guidance for managing security in healthcare facilities. They use very dangerous substances in hospitals, and so this is what we were addressing there. also guidance for security of hazardous material, CBRNE in healthcare facilities. So we also adopted as EN the ISO 223,000, so it's now a European standard. We also should mention some of the very interesting standards that are developed by other TCs than mine, but which are directly dedicated to crisis or security management. So there's the CENTC 325, which is chaired by the Czech Republic. And they have been doing 5 or 6 years ago a family of standards, which is great. I can tell you that as a police commissioner, this family of standards they have done, prevention of crime by urban planning and building design, is a very, very interesting one. It's a detail, but sometimes when you just have lights somewhere, you don't have crime anymore, you see? So, and these standards have been very successful and adopted in other parts of the world. See, and we're taking these standards to the ISO level now, ISO TC 292. There's also TC 439 private security services. They're working on just the issues of the providers, but they published last year a revised version of airport and aviation security services. These are the people who working in airports and that you meet when you take the plane. So they have procedures, they have contracts, and they really need to have references, so they issued this standard. So, if there's only one standard that you should know about, knowing our topic today, it's one of the TCI shared which has been published on October 10th, and it's crisis management, developing a strategic capability. So this standard is, I'm afraid to say, the only international standard dealing with crisis management. There are lots of standards on lots of topics, resilience, business continuity, disaster management, emergencies, but crisis is something very specific. And you probably know that it's very likely that most organizations, whatever they are, would probably face crisis once in their lives, So they have to be prepared. So this document was initiated by British Standardisation Institute, who is a convener of my working group 3, Crisis Management. We've been working 3 or 4 years on this document, I must say, and we gathered a whole range of very, very qualified experts from many, many European countries, practitioners, firefighters, police, people in charge of business continuity, communication people, and now we are spreading the knowledge about this achievement. It is very, very user-friendly. It is done for anyone, anyone who is not used to standards, certification, small organization, small company, a school, a church, or anything. If they read the document, they understand. That's so important. If they don't have much money, they can implement. So it is relevant to, anyone in the areas of resilience, risk, business continuity, crisis and emergency management, or even, of course, even public sector. Anyone can use that. Any size of organization. It deals with building management capability, crisis management, of course. How do you deal with crisis leadership, the strategic decision making, the communication, the training, validation, and learning from exercises. So I would urge you to ask Senelec about this standard because it's available since October. And if you're interested in knowing more about it, we have a launch meeting next week in London. So it's in the Deloitte building. So if you want to join, I will send you my presentation, and you have here all the details, and you can click on this and have the agenda and see if you're interested. It's will probably be 2,000 participants to this meeting. I've been spreading the knowledge in several countries, and lots of people are interested because, of course, you see how things evolve. So there's a huge demand on specific crisis management knowledge. What's important with this standard, I believe, is when you're in a crisis situation, you're never in this situation on your own. It's never just your business. It's going to be your environment. And it might be worldwide very quickly, or you might be in a situation of crisis because of somebody else's crisis that would affect you. So to get out of this requires knowledge, common understanding. So it's good that we have a basic crisis management culture that we share and that we can use and build on, that we all know how to do, and that we understand what the other partners do when you're in such situation. So I would finish my presentation with this comment, and thank you very much for your attention. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot this slide. Please get involved. You see, people say, oh, I would need standard, it will help me, it will be very valuable. Yes, but if you feel you need a standard, you're the one, probably the one to write it, to get at this table and to find the right solution, to write it down. And it's going to be your baby, so it's going to be applied, you know. So they don't grow on apples. You have to write them. So join your national standardization body, Senelec committees, in order to have this become real. Thank you. Okay, so I think we'll have maybe questions later on, and maybe I pass the word to Luc. Yes? So Luc van der Berger from Senelec. So Luc is going to set the standardization framework. He'll be more detailed on the framework.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I work in the Senelec Management Center. That means this is the secretariat of 2 European standards organizations, 2 different organizations with 1 common secretariat. And these 2 organizations are SEN and Senelec, the European Committee for Standardization, the European Committee for Electrotechnical Standardization. So that gives an idea of the scope. Senelec is about electrotechnical standards. SEN is in fact about everything that is not with Senelec or with ETSI. ETSI is about telecommunications and ICT. And together, SEN, Senelec and ETSI, we are 3 European standards organizations, the 3 organizations that are officially recognized by the European Commission through legislation 1025 of 2012. And what does this official recognition